Okay, can everyone hear me? I'm assuming you can. Good morning, Ahava. It's such a joy to be with you here today. What a beautiful community. Before I actually begin my talk, I do want to comment about connecting online. Um, I can't see you. I know you can see me, but I can't see the audience, but I know you're there. And so that sort of reminds me of spirit. And I know that we're all one, we're all connected, and we're all God expressed. I discovered during the pandemic, we were all online for work or to talk with family, to take classes. And what I realized having to practice online and not seeing people in person is, and I knew this already, but it really brought it home, there's no distance between us. I'm in the room with you. You're in the room with me. Yes, I'm on a video and I'd love to be there to get some hugs, but either way, we're all connected and there's really no difference. So I just want you to know that that's how I feel about it. So let's begin. You know, um, Faith is really easy when life is making sense. Things are going well, falling into place. But what I want to talk about today is what about practicing faith before the meaning of what's happening in your life is revealed? I do want to share something really human about myself. I don't always recognize a blessing when it first arrives. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. Sometimes it looks inconvenient, it looks painful, and sometimes it's just like, this should not be happening. And sometimes, it's just hard. Life can be hard sometimes. So today I want to explore this idea. What if what feels like disruption is sometimes divine alignment? What if spirit is working on our behalf in ways we can't recognize right away? And also, how do we stay compassionate with ourselves throughout these situations in our lives? Richard Bach says, what the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly. So recently, my daughter traveled to Nashville, Tennessee, to meet their boyfriend's family for the first time. My daughter lives in Seattle, and their new boyfriend, fairly new, 6 months or so, lives in Nashville. They get together a lot. They travel a bit, but we had met him, but my daughter had not traveled to meet his family yet. So they had a beautiful dinner with his parents and siblings. It was warm, inviting. And the next day, more family came over, and there's a lot of family there in Nashville. And one of the people that came over to meet my daughter was Aunt Mary. Now, Aunt Mary, it sounds like, is a presence. I haven't met her, but she's a tiny Southern Black woman, about 80 or 90 years old, I believe. She's carrying an oxygen tank, and she's got a real sparkle in her eye. My daughter sits next to her and says, "How are you? How are you doing, Aunt Mary?" And Aunt Mary says, "I'm trying to stay out of trouble." And my daughter's eyes lit up. And Aunt Mary says, "I'm mischievous." So you love her, right? Already. They started talking about the recent storm, the one that blanketed the South, froze everything, and even some trees exploded. I'm sure all of you know the storm that I'm talking about, being in Kentucky. So my daughter was concerned and asked how Aunt Mary fared in the storm. And Aunt Mary got very quiet, and she acknowledged that many people had suffered, lost their homes, even their lives. And then she shared this little piece. At her church, a huge old tree, and this is a church she had been at for decades, by the way, a huge old tree came down during the storm. It crashed down completely. And it was right in between the church and a home. And yet, no damage to the church, no damage to the home, no one was hurt. And my daughter said, "Wow, that was close. What a blessing no one was hurt. Really sad to lose that old tree, though, right?" And Aunt Mary said very matter-of-factly, "Well, we'd been planning to cut that tree down for years. So you know what happened? God just laid that tree down for us." Now that is consciousness. That is someone who lives in alignment with truth. Because in our teaching, we believe there is divine intelligence operating everywhere. And we know that life is moving forward with greater expression. And we are in relationship with that flow. Aunt Mary didn't say, "We got lucky." And she didn't say, "That could have been worse." And she wasn't grateful for the storm itself. She said, God just laid that tree down for us. That is spiritual vision. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, tells us life is always for us and never against us. That doesn't mean that everything that happens feels good, or that everything is easy to understand, or that we're supposed to immediately call every painful moment a blessing. And that also doesn't mean that everything that happens is good. Sometimes we're simply in the middle of the storm, and that's human. That's okay. But what does that mean for us? Because most of us aren't dealing with literal trees falling down in our yards, but we are dealing with plans falling apart, relationships shifting, unexpected changes, loss of any kind, the loss of a loved one. And then we always ask, why is this happening? Sometimes we ask that. But what if we could kind of shift that question to, could something be unfolding here that I don't see yet? Not, I must find a blessing right now, and not, if I don't see it, I'm spiritually wrong, but simply an opening. Because sometimes the job you didn't get makes way for something that really speaks to your soul in the workplace. The relationship that ends perhaps opens the door to a deeper relationship or time for yourself. That delay might protect you from something that you just didn't see coming. And sometimes we don't know. Not yet, maybe not ever. But that doesn't mean there isn't meaning. It just means the meaning has not revealed itself. So if you're in the middle of something hard right now, you're not failing at faith, you're not doing it wrong, you're just being human. And so maybe the practice is to allow just enough openness to let life show you more in time. Okay, so I'm going to share something very personal. I have to tell you, I went back and forth when I was writing this talk about whether to share this because it's pretty raw, but it really, really applies. So I'm going to share it with you. Very recently, my family and I said goodbye to my husband, Dan. And I can tell you honestly, I am not looking at this experience and saying, oh, what a blessing. Most of the moments are just grief. Just love continuing in this new way. But what I've found is this. My spiritual practice is not asking me to rush to meaning. It's just asking me to stay present, to stay open, and to trust that love is still here, even in this. And just to trust that, not that I have all the answers, because of course I don't, and every grief is different, but that I'm not alone. I'm not alone in this. Of course, I'm not alone because I have family and friends, but I'm not alone because Spirit is with me, in me, as me, always. Not everything that happens is a blessing. That would be spiritual bypass. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with this term, but I'm going to be completely inclusive and just define it so everyone is clear. Spiritual bypass is when we use spiritual ideas to avoid or override real human emotion, when we rush to say, everything happens for a reason, or this is a blessing, before we've allowed ourselves to feel the truth of what's actually here. It can sound like faith, but often it's a way of skipping over grief, anger, sadness, confusion in an effort to feel better or appear spiritually grounded. What I'm speaking of today is not that painful or difficult experiences are good in themselves. They're not. Loss is loss, and it deserves to be honored. But without bypassing the truth of our experience, we can remain open to the possibility that something meaningful, healing, or even beautiful may eventually emerge from what we've walked through. God could lay down that tree. My husband and Gary had been best friends since grade school. What a gift. Not everyone has this opportunity to have decades of friendship, of close friendship through so many phases. They were both avid motorcycle riders and very skilled at it. About 30 years ago, Gary was leading a chapter of Harley riders on a cross-country trek somewhere in the Midwest, and he was involved in a fatal accident. And we were devastated. We traveled to his hometown to the funeral, and at the reception, we reconnected with some old friends we hadn't seen in a really long time. Shortly after that, they came down to visit us in Los Angeles and began to talk about this church they were going to, the Science of Mind. Kind of sounded too good to be true because it really aligned with what we believed, and we had no idea there was an entire global organization that taught this and practiced it. So we found a local church, and we have been going ever since. Did Gary have to die for that to happen? Perhaps not, but he did, and it was tragic. And that led us directly to this teaching, which has been by far the biggest influence on how we live our lives to date. The event in itself, my husband's best friend making his transition, was not good, but something really good and life-altering occurred as a direct result. God laid down that tree. There's actually a model that helps describe this, and I believe it beautifully aligns with our spiritual understanding. So this example is applied to grief, and I know I'm talking a lot about grief today. Obviously, it's on my mind. But grief can be any kind of loss or difficult situation. And so I'm going to use the word grief in this model, but apply it to anything in your life. It's called the dual process model. The dual process model of grief tells us that healing doesn't happen, in a straight line. It moves in a rhythm. We naturally oscillate between loss-oriented moments, sort of like that deep feeling where we feel the sadness or the grief or the challenge, and restoration moments where we tend to life, find small pieces of normalcy, even moments of joy, distraction. Grief and joy live side by side. From a spiritual perspective, I see this as a sacred dance between being fully human and simultaneously showing up as a perfect expression of spirit. There are moments when we sit in the ache, honoring what has been lost. And there are moments life gently invites us forward into connection, into breath, into the next step. Both are holy. Both are necessary. We don't have to rush out of our grief or sadness or depression or whatever we're in to be spiritual. And we don't have to feel guilty when a moment of lightness returns. This movement back and forth is not a failure of faith. It is the natural way life carries us, with great tenderness, through what we cannot carry alone. It is the paradox of being human, that we have these emotions and we're not perfect in the human way, and yet we are perfect and we are spirit expressed. And this movement is life. Brene Brown says, healing and hurting at the same time is perhaps the most profound contradiction of all. You're not broken for being all these things at once. You are beautifully, gloriously whole. So I've shared some examples of looking back at a difficult situation and seeing the good that came from it. There's a great value in this practice as it helps to demonstrate, albeit in a rearview mirror, the principle that Source is always holding us, always providing. It helps to reveal deep meaning in our lives. I know I always like to talk to people about their demonstrations through prayer and recognize, we know it's real, we know it's always happening, but it's really good to talk about it and think about it and recognize it. But what about when we're in the middle of the storm, when the challenge seems unsurmountable? How do we cultivate faith then? Now, Aunt Mary didn't need proof. She lives from a place of trust, acceptance, and knowing. She wasn't denying the storm. She was including God in it. That's the difference. And maybe for us, in our situations, including God in it is the key to moving through it with faith. And sometimes it looks like, I don't understand this, but I'm willing not to be alone in it. So if you could right now, think of a challenging time, a relationship, event, or situation. It could be current or something in the past or way in the past. It's just to give you context for the practices I'm going to bring up. And even if you don't have a situation in your mind, that's totally fine. When something comes up in the future, try and remember these two things I'm going to talk about. The first practice, this may sound cliche, but it's gratitude. So what I've come to understand that gratitude isn't just helpful in difficult times, it's vital, it's essential. And interestingly, it's often in these moments of crisis that gratitude has the most to offer us. When we feel depleted, Gratitude can gently restore our energy. And when life feels broken, it can begin to knit something back together. When we're in despair, it can open the smallest window to hope. That doesn't mean gratitude comes easily in these moments. It doesn't. It's natural to feel grateful when things are going well, but no one wakes up and says, I'm so grateful I lost this, or I'm so grateful for this pain. That's not what I'm talking about. There's an important distinction between feeling grateful and being grateful. We don't always have full control over our emotional state. We can't simply snap a finger and switch to feel happy or peaceful or joyful on command. Our feelings tend to follow our thoughts, and we know this from science of mind teaching. And that's why we look at our thoughts and our beliefs and pray around our limiting or our old beliefs. It's really our thoughts, how we interpret what's happening, what our beliefs are, and what we believe should be happening. But being grateful, that's different. That's a choice. It's a way of orienting ourselves to life. It's an attitude we can practice even when our emotions haven't caught up yet. And over time, that orientation becomes something steady, something that isn't so easily shaken by the ups and downs of life. It aligns with prayer. When we have regular prayer practice and gratitude practice, it shores us up. When something difficult happens, gratitude doesn't erase the pain, but it can widen our perspective. It helps us remember that this moment, as intense as it may be, is not the whole of our story. And yes, this kind of perspective can be hard to access, but it's powerful when we do. The gratitude I've been practicing with my family since my husband transitioned has not been for his death, but for his life. And for the amazing people at the hospice center who provided a space for a sacred, dignified experience for all of us. And for my children and my family and my friends and my spiritual community. And so as I'm moving through this storm, I'm allowing the openness to be grateful for these things at the same time. They work together. When we intentionally cultivate gratitude, not as a forced feeling, but a quiet, steady practice, it becomes like a spiritual resilience, almost like an inner support system that catches us when we fall. And we're beginning to understand, even scientifically, that people who practice gratitude tend to be more resilient to everyday stress and to life's bigger challenges. This is just another example of the scientific community catching up with science of mind. That doesn't mean life is easier. It just means we're better resourced to meet the challenges. And the second practice for times of difficulty is faith. I don't mean that faith that everything will work out. That just takes us back to spiritual bypass, that it's all good. I mean faith that each and every one of us is living, breathing expression of the divine. At the deepest level, spirit has got you. And knowing that, really knowing it on a deep level, even during a difficult time, is what faith looks like. Looking back at how good has come from crisis can shore up belief in the divine. But faith is faith. It is the evidence of things unseen and unknown. So the next time something unexpected happens, something inconvenient or even really painful, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, did God just lay down that tree? Is something being moved on my behalf? And if the answer is not clear, that's okay, because sometimes the blessing is immediate, and sometimes it unfolds slowly over time with hindsight, with gratitude, with faith, and with healing. I invite you to carry this gentle question with you this week. Where might life be supporting me, even if I can't fully see it yet? And I will leave you with this affirmation. I trust the unfolding of my life, even when I do not understand it. I allow myself grace in the process, and I know that Spirit is with me always. So with that, let's anchor this in prayer. Please close your eyes if you're comfortable, or soften your gaze. Take a deep breath. Really be present in this moment. I just recognize and know that spirit is in the house, that it is everywhere present always. It is a part of the rising sun, the beautiful sunset, the trees, the stars, the wind, our beautiful earth, and our entire universe. It is always creating more of itself by means of its own momentum, its own creative process. More good, more love, more harmony, more expansion. And it is limitless. It is everyone, every single being on our planet and throughout the universe. Every human, every animal, every fish, every winged one. It is beauty and love itself. And I know it is who I am. It is all that I am. I am spirit expressed, as is everyone who can hear my voice right now. Everyone watching now or in the future, each one a beautiful expression of God. And so I just give thanks for this time together, knowing that this service is blessed. And as Jennifer said, really, really feeling spirit in the house, and knowing that we are all connected, and that whatever anyone is experiencing now in their lives, if there's any difficulty, challenge, confusion, pain, that God is there. There is nowhere that God is not. And that I claim and accept for each person present to the principle of faith and the time and the spaciousness to sit and breathe and know, and to recognize that spirit is there, whatever is happening. This is always true, no matter what. And I'm so grateful for that truth. I'm so grateful for this teaching. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be with you today. And I release my word into that loving, divine law of consciousness that always says yes. And so it is. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today.